All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Data Centers and Public Resources, a panel discussion with audience Q&A sponsored by the John C. Culver Public Policy Center and the Interdisciplinary Studies program here at Simpson College. My name is Seth Anderson, and I serve as director of the Culver Public Policy Center. More than a year ago, I began having lunchtime conversations with Dr. John Pauly, professor of philosophy and director of the Interdisciplinary Studies program here at Simpson, in the back room at Wynn's Restaurant, where, of course, many of the best conversations in town happen. We were talking about the explosive growth of data centers in Iowa and across the nation, and the public reactions to that development and its demands on critical public resources and infrastructure. The topic wasn't quite ripe to explore last spring, but it certainly is now, as evidenced by the mention of data centers' use of electricity in the State of the Union address 2 weeks ago, recent statements by tech industry leaders pledging that data centers will pay for additional electricity usage and related infrastructure to manage growing demand, legislation introduced in dozens of states, including Iowa, to better manage data center growth, adoption of county and municipal ordinances, including here in Linn County, regarding data center projects, and just next door in Norwalk, Iowa, the city council last week unanimously approved a new data center development project that drew an overflow crowd of residents to provide public comment. And now my friend and colleague John Pauly will introduce our panel.
Thank you, Seth. Welcome, everyone, to Simpson. Glad you could make it. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator and panelists this evening. Moderator Kathy Obradovich serves as editor of Iowa Capital Dispatch, a nonprofit web-based news service affiliated with the National States Newsroom Network. Kathy previously served as a political columnist and opinion editor for the Des Moines Register and has covered Iowa government and politics for more than 30 years. She has also moderated several panel discussions and special programs at Simpson in the past, and we are delighted to welcome her back to campus. Jay Sepperly serves as advocacy coordinator for the Iowa Association of Electric Cooperatives and is a 2025 graduate of Simpson College. Jay was a Culver Fellow who double majored in history and political science. Christina Murphy serves as general manager of West Des Moines Waterworks and has 2 decades of experience in municipal water management. West Des Moines is home to several large data centers. How many? 5. Thank you. Chad Quick is Economic Development Director for the City of Altoona, which became a host community to one of the first large data centers in Iowa 12 years ago. Sammy Sheets is a member of the Linn County Board of Supervisors and former state representative for House District 78. Last month, Supervisor Sheets and his colleagues unanimously adopted a new zoning code for large-scale data center projects in unincorporated rural areas of Linn County. Brian Waller serves as president of the Technology Association of Iowa, representing Iowa's technology professionals and leaders by sharing resources, strengthening networks, and shaping policy to drive innovation across all industries. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Obradovich and our panelists to Simpson College.
All right. Thanks to Seth Anderson and Dr. Pauly for your introductions and for organizing this important and very timely forum. And thanks to everybody for being here. I'm really looking forward to learning from these experts about this topic. Because I am not an expert, not even close. In fact, if you looked at my Google search, my last Google search before I walked in here, it was, do I say data or data? And you've already heard it both ways tonight, so I guess we can't be wrong. So my job here really is just to facilitate the discussion among the panelists and a little bit later with you all. We will tonight hear brief opening statements from each panelist, and we'll have a few minutes for follow-up discussion and a few questions from me. And then we will open it up for questions from the audience. We will take questions from students first, as is the Simpson tradition, I'm told, and then the audience at large. We only have an hour total, and I think we could spend many hours discussing. There's so much to talk about, but just an hour total. So I'm going to say it now, and you're going to hear me say it one more time. When it's your turn to ask questions, we only have time for questions, not speeches. Okay? I know. I've been assured that you all know the difference. So, finally, a little bit of an advertisement here. If you are interested in learning more about this topic, Dr. Polly mentioned my parent news organization called States Newsroom has a national website called News from the States. And because our sister newsrooms have been doing so much reporting about data centers around the country, we actually now have a section in our website that is devoted to this coverage. So anybody who's interested, if you want to come down and scan the QR code afterward, you'll find I promise you'll find a lot of reading material. So that's my little advertisement. So, okay. Now, let's just go down the line, if you guys don't mind, and just a short opening statement, and we'll start with Jay.
Well, good evening, everybody. Again, I work for the Iowa Association of Electric Cooperatives. We represent all 39 of Iowa's rural electric cooperatives, or RECs. They deliver power to the ruralest of Iowans in all 99 counties. We serve about 650,000 Iowans. That includes data centers, and data centers really do cause some challenges for the electrical industry. Again, they demand 24/7 power at a high level, and that's just different to what we're used to. We're used to households or businesses that have peaks and valleys in their demand throughout the day. So their 24/7 demand really does put pressure on the grid, especially during those peak hours and peak times. And we're kind of at a turning point in the generation industry. We are seeing, again, increasing demand for electricity while our big builds in the 80s are sunsetting. So we're at a time when we're trying to build more, but we're seeing the mentality of not in my backyard when it comes to energy generation. That's the same for data centers as well. There are moratoriums on data centers throughout the nation and the state as well. But the reason that data centers are coming to Iowa is because there's cheap energy. We have some of the cheapest rates in the nation. We have some of the cheapest land in the nation, and we have cheap labor as well. So those three reasons are the reasons that they're coming here and coming to the Midwest as well. But that's just a shallow dive into data centers. We're going to go much deeper here tonight. But happy to be here and be a part of this discussion, and happy to answer your questions tonight.
All right. Thank you. Christina.
Thanks so much. So, as we mentioned, West Des Moines has 5 Microsoft data centers and 1 data center that's not yet started construction that's been approved. So my reference point is only Microsoft, so I want to make sure I say that. I don't have exposure to some of the other companies that do data centers. Do data centers use a lot of water? I get that question a lot, right? It depends. I know you hate that answer. So let me put some context to that, because I think context on water usage is really important in that conversation. So our data centers in West Des Moines use about 2 to 7% of the total usage in West Des Moines. So I think sometimes people think it's like 80%, but it's not. It's 2 to 7%. And I always say irrigation makes up about 30 to 40% of our usage in West Des Moines. And funny enough, the month of January, our executive laser wash car washes use more water than the data centers. So it does depend. So the data centers in West Des Moines, many of them use evaporative cooling. Although Microsoft has committed to, in 2024, moving to closed loop cooling, and you might wonder what that means. Evaporative cooling, that technology does use water for cooling. The closed loop, you generally would expect about office park kind of type usage. They used a closed loop cooling system like I talked about. So I think it really depends. I think it's important to know that other industries use evaporative cooling. Any of our large office buildings or hospitals use evaporative cooling for their chillers to keep things cool in the summer. So it's not the only industry that uses evaporative cooling. So keep that in mind. And I often have to say this because people blame the data centers for the irrigation ban last summer. The irrigation ban is not related to a quantity issue. And I say that because previous years we were in drought for many years, and we didn't have any restrictions, and we met all the demands of the data centers. However, last year we had a water quality issue due to nitrates, and that is not the topic of this panel discussion. But what I want you to know is that was like a source water quality issue and some treatment capacity issue associated with that pollutant. So not because we didn't have enough water. So the goal of a utility is always to be supportive of its city's economic development, and that's what we do at West Des Moines Water Works, and that includes both residential, commercial, and industrial. And so data centers can be an industrial user, as you know. So I think it's also important, people ask this, is Microsoft paying their fair share? Are we charging costs of infrastructure to our ratepayers in West Des Moines? Again, I can only talk to you about my experience. I would say Microsoft has been an excellent partner in West Des Moines. We have constructed $25 million worth of water infrastructure that they have paid for directly. And that doesn't just support Microsoft, that supports all of our ratepayers. And those things are a new elevated tower, a 2 million gallon elevated tower, and then something that we call an aquifer storage and recovery well, which is about 3 million gallons a day during the summer. And so that infrastructure helps support Microsoft's needs, and it also provides support to our customers. So Microsoft can pay, or has paid their fair share. And I guess my closing comment is that data centers do have a place here in Iowa, but we do need to make sure that we're diligent in making sure that they pay their adequate costs and make sure that those are recovered by the utility or by the city.
Thank you. Chad.
Well, thanks for having me here tonight as well. I'll give you a little bit of my perspective coming from Altoona. So Altoona, we are home to 2 data center complexes. One's the Meta complex, which is their world's largest operational facility. We also have a smaller data center complex called LightEdge. LightEdge Solutions operates a couple of buildings. We also have 2 other pieces of ground where data center companies have bought land to develop data centers. So the city of Altoona is not frightened of data centers. We do work out water agreements with those companies ahead of time. As Christina said, Meta does not use a lot of water either. I know you see a lot of reports of millions of gallons a day, and it's just not, it doesn't happen. If all of the Meta complex was residential homes, they would use more water than Meta does. They are not our largest water user. We have a small pasta plant that is our largest water user in Altoona. Like you mentioned also, we have a lot of car washes. Car washes use a ton of water. Irrigation uses a lot of water. And all industry will use some form of water. We were presented with an RFP recently for a food processor that wanted to use 1 million gallons a day. And we passed on that. That's just a lot of consumption for a town of our size. I guess my hope tonight is to be able to answer any questions and maybe help dispel some rumors and some myths that may be out there, and at least coming from Altoona's perspective, how we work with data centers.
All right, thank you. Sammy.
Yeah, I just want to briefly thank Simpson College and Kathy, you hosting this panel. I think I'm really very, very excited to dive into some of these issues, and this is just an excellent group to talk about this really pressing issue with. I'm kind of excited to bring a local government perspective. Lynn County, as was mentioned in the bio, just within the last month passed our comprehensive data center ordinance, and kind of our philosophy as a county, as we developed this over the last 7-8 months, was we looked across the state, across the country, and we kind of saw just two extremes to data center development. We saw some communities that were just allowing data center construction in heavy industrial areas by right, with not a lot of public input, not a lot of public discussion about the resource-intensive development that a lot of these projects come with. And then we saw a lot of communities this was referenced earlier, that just had outright moratoriums on data centers. No questions asked, we don't want it here, no thank you. And at the county, at Lynn County, we thought that there was a middle path where we would have a basic minimum set of requirements related to water reporting, when things related to noise, setback, construction, just keeping our residents in mind, because these are massive, massive industrial projects that can go on for 5, 10, 15 years, as some of the Des Moines metro communities know. And so we wanted to do it in a pro-growth and a pro-community responsible way when we think about data center development. We had funny enough, a lot of pushback from our residents that said that kind of middle approach wasn't going far enough, that we weren't doing enough, and we really did try to present both sides of the case to our residents and say, we do understand that these are resource-intensive projects. The proposed Google site in unincorporated Lynn County would have used over 10 million gallons of water a day, so actually a very sizable amount of water. And so residents had rightful concerns about what's the benefit to the community, especially if a company comes in and says, we don't want to pay taxes, and we don't really want to give that much back to the community. A lot of residents in a very bipartisan kind of political spectrum said, what's the benefit to our community? And so we tried to develop an ordinance that kind of balanced it, that recognized that there were concerns, but also that there are benefits. I used to be a union representative, and as you guys will know from just the construction jobs, these are creating generational wealth for people that go into union apprenticeships that work on these projects for 5, 10, 15 years and are paying some of the best wages that we're seeing in the construction industry just writ large. So I want to just kind of dispel with the idea that there's either one path or another path, that you're either completely against this, that you have moratoriums, we don't want this anywhere near our community, or that you just kind of let them come in by right. I think we chose a really good middle path at Lynn County, and I'm happy to talk about that more tonight.
Okay, thank you, Sammy. And now, last but not least, Brian.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you to Simpson. This topic is happening in every state across the nation, so I appreciate Simpson for leading and Kathy for moderating. I've been president of the Technology Association of Iowa for 12 years now. The Technology Association of Iowa represents over 300 technology-driven organizations across Iowa, including nearly every state's large employers. And many of these companies that are our members, you wouldn't think of as tech companies traditionally. But the reality matters because our economy now, the reality of data centers matters because our economy now is fundamentally digital. And the physical infrastructure that powers it is just as critical as roads and rails and energy. And data centers are now foundational infrastructure for Iowa's modern economy. From agriculture to manufacturing, healthcare, insurance to education, they all rely on data centers. And our Iowa data center ecosystem currently is really diverse. It includes hyperscalers like Meta and Microsoft and Apple and some of these larger ones. But a lot of the data centers here in the state of Iowa are some of the smaller co-location. Chad mentioned LightEdge, for instance. The Technology Association of Iowa Board of Directors, it was represented by the top technology executives from all your major employers. Think of the top technology executive from Fairway, Casey's, Sukup Manufacturing, Wells Blue Bunny Ice Cream. They all depend on data centers at some point to run their businesses. Sure, it's some of those hyperscalers, but a lot of them are smaller, low co-location data centers that they're using. And the opportunity for us to lead as Iowans right now is pretty historic because there's two reasons why the data center industry is growing. One is artificial intelligence, and the other is cybersecurity. So if you're a retail store here and you are building artificial intelligence models, or you are storing customer data, you want that at a data center closer to home for latency, for security, and for access to that information. So I know when you talk about data centers, you think of big tech, but a lot of co-location, smaller data centers exist here in the state of Iowa. And so hopefully I can give more of the broader context of how data centers exist within the technology ecosystem here in Iowa. So thank you.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So I do have a few questions before we go to the audience, but first I'd just like to open it up to any panelist who wants to respond or ask a question based on something that you heard from one of the other panelists. Anybody, and just I'll let you volunteer if anybody has any response or anything that you want to tack on to anything that's been said so far, and if not, I'll just go to my first question. Here's another plug for my organization, but State Line, which is another sister news organization to Iowa Capitol Dispatch, reported just this week that 11 states are considering legislation to put a moratorium on new data center development. In some cases, they want to create more time to study related issues, such as environmental impacts. Iowa is not one of those states, and is not really, at this point, not considering becoming one. But what legislators are considering is looking at assessing energy and water use of existing data centers. There's a bill introduced at the Capitol right now, and I hear it could be coming up very soon, like maybe tomorrow in the House. That bill, House File 2690, if you want to look it up, it's eligible for debate. Its sponsor, Representative Cindy Golding, was actually invited to join the panel here, but she had a conflict. So anyway, this bill it essentially asks for a study. It also goes to the utility board and wants to try to insulate Iowans from the cost of serving data centers with electricity. There are a few other things in the bill, and we hear there's amendments that are coming as well. So that this bill is a moving target as well. But what I want to ask the panelists, first of all, is this the direction the state should be going with our policy related to data centers? And if not, what is the smart way to proceed? I'm going to start with Brian because I know you're lobbying on this.
Sure. Yeah, we're undecided. I think it's a moving target right now, and I know tomorrow they're going to have some heavy discussion on it, but I have a former legislator sitting next to me, Sammy, so I'll save some time for you. But from us, I think much like creating legislation around artificial intelligence is a fool's errand because it moves so fast. So future-proofing some of this is, and putting legislation around a technology that's moving so fast that could stifle investment to our state is somewhat troubling for us. So we're aware of it, but we're really wondering where it goes. But we are pro-investment for Iowa from all technology related industries. And so we're just kind of wondering where this goes and how this will make Iowa open or not open for business for future investments.
Okay. And Jay, do you think that there are guardrails that should be put in place for your customers? Part of this bill is aimed at, and I can't tell you exactly how they do it, but aimed at trying to insulate electric customers from some sort of price shock related to the strain on the system that a future data center might cause.
Yeah, like I said before, we're undecided as well. We're still monitoring this situation. I think this legislation has some promise to it. Again, it all depends on the amendments and what's attached to it. I know before there was attachments to having the electric industry provide data as well. I don't know where that is right now with the amendments, but
Yeah, the bill has changed.
yeah, as the legislature and legislators are aware that they need to do something, I think they hear from constituents every day that something that they want something done about data centers. I'll let our lobby team and our regulatory team decide that, but yeah, I think it's a developing and moving target.
Yeah, so, well, Sammy, does a community like yours benefit from having state sort of guardrails on how you can proceed with this industry? Or, given your recent experience, are you better off trying to do it yourself or not?
So, one, I think it's funny that I left the legislature to stop commenting on specific pieces of legislation that are floating around. But, so I won't comment on the specific bill because we'll see whatever final version it takes. What I will say is I think transparency has been a key concern that we've heard from residents over and over. And kind of to what I was saying earlier, there have been some communities in Iowa and across the country that allowed these data centers by right and treated it kind of as normal heavy industrial economic development, and a lot of residents were freaking out and saying, well, this isn't normal heavy industrial. Most projects aren't using 5, 10, 15 million gallons of water a day and or potentially raising my utility rates as a result. And so I do think some sort of statewide transparency and some statewide minimum set of standards that communities can basically have as a floor for future development, whether that's water reporting, some of the stuff we have in our ordinance. It doesn't necessarily have to be curtailment or really drastic things. It just, can we have some measures that create transparency for residents so that every resident in the state knows that if a project is being proposed in their area, they know what kind of resources are going to be used from their community, what potential ramifications that development could have on their utility bills, et cetera. And the last thing I'll say, and this is very specific to Lynn County, but we might see an amendment, it sounds like, in this bill tomorrow related to this. We are now seeing, and Lynn County is a prime example of some of these hyperscalers that are pitting local jurisdictions against each other to have lower taxes and to have less regulation when it comes to water. And we have a specific example of that in Lynn County just literally within the last few weeks. So to have some sort of statewide standard, minimum set of standards that, again, aren't burdensome to business, but at the same time say to residents, here's a basic set of safeguards that you can have, that you can be guaranteed to have as a resident of the state of Iowa, and a company can't just move over one town and basically plan a project that is still going to obviously have ramifications for you as a resident, because I'm sure other panelists can speak better than I can, but these are regional projects. Data centers are regional water users, regional power users. They have regional impacts, and so we need to have a regional and hopefully a statewide kind of solution to think through this.
Yeah, so I'm not sure whether to go to Christina next, but you've got your mic in your hand, Christina, so I will. Well, let's talk about water, though, for a minute, and just sort of generally, should West Des Moines Waterworks welcome sort of statewide guidelines, or are you guys doing fine without it?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I understand the interest. There is a mechanism for determining whether you're recovering your costs. It's a cost of service study. This is not new. This has been in the water utility, and I guarantee it's in the electric utility too. We want to be fair in recovering the cost of treating water appropriately to the people that are using it. That's why we have a higher irrigation rate than we do our domestic rate. And so I do think that that mechanism is there, and maybe the guidance should be that we're required to do so on a periodic basis to make sure that we can be transparent to our customers that we're recovering costs. So I believe that mechanism is there. There's not necessarily a rule about how frequently a utility needs to do it necessarily, but as a utility, I certainly want to make sure that the costs are attributed to those that are causing it, right? That's what a cost of service study does. I find it, I'll tell you, West Des Moines, I feel like, is a utility that has adequately prepared for growth in our community. That means we have developed source, treatment, and transmission, and have planned. This takes 10 years ahead of time to plan for these types of improvements. And so some of that is on the utility. If they're going to entertain a large water user such as that, how much have they prepared for it, or how much are they prepared to move forward with those plans? It's not a bubble, it's not like I can poke a hole for a well anywhere I want to. That is not how it goes. And so you have to plan strategically where you're going to get your water from. I will say I find the legislation about data centers really interesting, that we're so focused on the water usage associated with data centers, but there isn't a conversation about other water users, such as ethanol or food manufacturing and rendering, like a Michael's Foods or a Barilla or a JBS, or across the country, specialty crops. We use a lot of irrigation for those types of specialty crops. And I think a lot of you remember how there were no trucks or vehicles on the parking lots. Does anybody remember that during COVID? Like, couldn't buy a vehicle if you tried, because we didn't have the microtrips. And we want to bring microchip manufacturing back to the state, and those do use a fair amount of water. Your car, your jeans, all these things use water to create, and so maybe we need to be thinking more holistically about your water footprint.
Okay, good point. And Chad, Altoona doing fine on its own, or would you like to see some policy from the state?
Well, representing a local government, I'm always going to probably advocate for home rule and Altoona being able to make decisions for Altoona. But I do think we're a little spoiled in that we've been working with data centers for 15 plus years and hyperscale data centers for 12. I think, I still get calls weekly from data centers looking for sites. I guarantee you almost every community in the state of Iowa is getting the same ones, especially if they're somewhere close to a metropolitan area. It's not going away, as Brian mentioned. This is just going to continue to increase. Having said that, I think we know the questions to ask those companies when they do make those calls, so it's a little easier for us versus a smaller town that's just dealing with this for the first time. I talked to a city council person from a small northwest Iowa town that was about 20 miles outside of Sioux City. It sounds like they were getting interest from a data center because they've got a lot of power available in the area. And they're literally, they have no idea what they're talking about. They have no idea how to work with companies like that. So some guardrails from the state probably isn't a bad idea, to put some minimum thresholds in, even if it's some zoning standards or whatever it is, setbacks, things like that. Some bare minimums that communities have a threshold to start with is probably not a terrible idea.
And Chad, while you have the floor, and I'll ask everybody about this, but what about economic development for data centers? Iowa is among the majority of the states, and right now, I think last I read, there was about 37 states that offered some kind of incentives for data center construction. Several states, Virginia and Michigan are two of them, are considering repealing those incentives. Last year, Iowa altered its data center incentives, didn't take them away, but they put a 10 or 15-year limit on sales tax exemptions for new data centers instead of the unlimited exemption or indefinite exemption. And at the same time, Iowa also granted a property tax exemption for data centers beginning in 2027. So, Chad, starting with you, you guys have been doing this for a long time, and you say every town in Iowa is getting calls. Do they really need incentives anymore? Are these incentives outdated? Should Iowa consider getting rid of that?
Again, I think that's better left to the local developments to do. And again, from experience, I think I can tell you that the agreement that we had with Meta 15 years ago, 12 years ago, is not the agreement we would make today. Matter of fact, the last data center development agreement we worked on it with a company with had zero tax incentives in it. Zero. Because those folks need the communities to be partners now more than they did 15 years ago. So I think you're starting to see that turn over. But the data centers really do need communities that are going to be partners with them, folks that are that can deal with that infrastructure and those size of buildings, especially on the hyperscalers. The other thing I think I'll point out is that I don't think there's any two data centers in the country that probably look the same. Even looking at the Meta campus in Altoona, remember the construction's been spread over 12, 14 years now. There isn't one building on that campus that looks identical. Every time they build a new building, it's 9 months later and they have new technology that they figured out. They use fewer exterior generators and tanks. At the newest buildings, they're 1 million square feet, and they have 4 generator pads with them that they exercise occasionally. So they've gotten so much better with the technology, I think, on the inside of the buildings as well as the outside of the buildings, that, again, I just think the economic development incentive is something that's really better left to the local government, and then they can make those decisions. But I think communities are in a much better position now than they were a while ago with the tax incentives.
Given other discussions at the State House, property tax exemptions may not be the most popular choice, but we could see.
Well, yeah, cities can't afford to be giving away a lot of property tax exemptions right now.
Yeah. So, well, Brian, from the industry perspective, is it really community by community, or if, as Christina suggested, data centers might be asked to offset, the cost of their water, et cetera, would incentives be a way to, sort of help them offset that?
It's a great question. I was talking to Sammy prior to this. 16 years ago, I was hired by the Iowa Economic Development Authority. I was a young guy, and some of the first data center deals were being haggled out. And I could set the sense of pride in Iowa to think these major tech billion-dollar companies were going to invest in Iowa. I can tell you, 16 years later, that conversation has changed dramatically, not only amongst the citizens of Iowa, but we were even talking amongst leaders in Iowa Economic Development Authority and their appetite for incentives around economic development projects. But I'll say this. Economic development incentives are going to be around. They're going to use them for every industry to attract talent. Chad personalized it. I'm from Sioux City, Iowa. My family's all from Northwest Iowa. Let's be blunt here. There's not a ton of investment that is pouring into rural Northwest Iowa. And so if you get a call from a data center that says we want to flood investment into your community, you're going to pick up that call, and that's a really enticing call. The fact of the matter is the appetite to give large incentives for those projects, I feel, is not really there, just to read the room that I do. But ultimately, incentives for economic development projects aren't going anywhere.
And Jay, electric cooperatives are part of the economic development discussion, probably more so than you have been in the past. Is that something that you foresee rural communities and your customers using as an incentive for people to move into those communities and that kind of investment?
I think, like it said before, when it comes to local government, the RECs are in their community. They're built from their community. They're going to do what's right for their community. Again, it really depends on what the community feels about it, whether they need that economic development. And the RECs already do economic development in there, whether that's through Red Lake programs where they can help give out loans to local communities as well. So they're already invested in their communities. I don't know. I know we don't give out specific rates to data centers to incentivize them to come in. They're going to be treated like any other payer. So.
Any other payer, okay. And Christina, I've got a question more about water, unless you would like to weigh in on economic development first.
No, I mean, I think just like on the electric side, on the water, they pay the same rate. We expect the same payments. If they're in a fee district, they have to pay those fees. We do try and recover those costs just like we would any other customer and make sure that we're made whole. So I know in the city of West Des Moines, certainly there's been a lot of benefit from having the data centers there. It wasn't just a relationship associated with the construction. There is an ongoing relationship in which Microsoft continues to invest in the community and community projects. So that has proven to be a positive impact for West Des Moines.
Okay. It was mentioned earlier, one of Indianola's neighbors, Norwalk, just approved a development agreement for a $12 billion data center project. Despite, the city council heard a lot from residents about this. There were a lot of concerns raised. By the way, I don't think they've actually said who the company is publicly. Do you know, Brian? You want to break the news for us? Okay. Okay. Well, one of the key issues that the residents brought up was water usage. And the mayor said the city is using only about half of its 4.1 million gallons of daily usage. They're through Central Iowa Water Works, so this is not one of your communities. But Meanwhile, it also has 650,000 gallons a day set aside for industrial use. And the company behind the data center, whatever they may be, wants 400,000 gallons of that. So it is, a significant share of the money that they have, or the water that they have set aside for industrial use. So Norwalk as a community is fast growing. So you've got, they're using about half of their 4.1 million gallons. You think, oh, well, they've got almost 2 million gallons to go. That's a lot. But Norwalk, let's see, in the last 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, grew 43%. And they are growing at a rate now, based on the latest census data, of about 5%, 4 to 5% a year. So they're growing pretty fast. I mean, that 2 million gallons is, you'll be at 3 probably, by 2030 is my guess, if they keep growing at that rate. So, as you look at it, I'm not actually asking you to comment directly on Norwalk, but as you look at that situation, what would your advice be to a fast-growing community about planning its water needs for the future and industrial customers and adding a big project that says it's going to use quite a bit of water?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. First, just to kind of clarify, CIWW, Central Iowa Water Works, is the wholesale provider of water. There's 12 member agencies. Norwalk's one of them.
Okay.
West Des Moines Waterworks is one of them. And so we buy our water from CIWW, and then we sell it to our retail customers. It's really important in water infrastructure, and I know electric they probably are longer. I need to be, if I'm thinking about tomorrow, I'm a little late, right? So water infrastructure, generally, you need to be thinking a decade ahead of time about what your population projections are, what you think you're going to see for growth characteristics, what you want to hold in reserve for industrial customers that are beyond what you would typically, like a bigger user, right? I'll be honest, unless it's above a half MGD, I don't get too nervous about it at West Des Moines Waterworks. We are planning for those types of industrial customers. So I can tell you that CIWW just went through a significant planning process, and Norwalk was part of that, just like West Des Moines Waterworks, and looking at what their future needs are. And so I think they've been having those conversations and thinking about what those needs are. And that's probably all I can't comment on their specific requests or their projections, but we've all gone through that exercise just recently at Central Iowa Waterworks.
Okay. And Jay, thinking about, I'm not going to ask specifically about electric use for Norwalk, but as you think about a community with rural Iowa, with REC, and looking at growth capacity on your system for any kind of big industrial customer that would be a heavy power user, let alone a data center, what questions should they be asking, and what kind of planning process would you recommend?
Again, each community is different, but in rural Iowa is been pretty steady across time. It hasn't really changed. If anything, there's a decrease in power demand. So for some communities, it makes sense to have a data center come in and increase the power that they have to distribute. Most of our cooperatives are distribution cooperatives, so they don't actually create or generate the power. We get it, again, wholesale from generation and transmission cooperatives. 2 of them are in the state, and we use 7 across the region. So again, it's community-based on whether they think it's right for them to come in. And when it comes to Norwalk is in Mid-American territory, so ask them that.
That's somebody else's problem. Okay, so we are going to turn it over to your questions now, and I can tell that there's already some people who have them. We're going to start with students, but I think that we can fairly quickly move on to the rest of the audience. And again, just please, you can direct to the panelists or you can just ask somebody in particular. Yeah, go up here, I think. And yeah, please, just questions, not speeches.
All right. Hi, guys. My name's Edward. So one of the big criticisms with specifically data centers and building them on the economic side is that they only inject, the substantial construction cost of the economy. It doesn't help longevity. My question is, how do you respond to the longevity concerns of economic? You have the data center there and you build it and it inserts some economic growth, but then how does it sustain the economy on the long end? I think that's, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Maybe Brian, start with that one, and then.
Sure. Then I'll throw it to the communities of how they really give back. Because I know Microsoft is a good steward of West Des Moines schools and give back to Altoona. You can cover that. So Google's largest data center in North America is outside of Council Bluffs, Iowa. It was built 20 years ago, and it has been under construction for 20 years. And they give back, and they can give you kind of what they do for the community. But think about that for the trades. I think Sammy mentioned that, of the impact on the trades in that community. But with the evolution of technology and artificial intelligence and data, you're going to need to upgrade your facilities. And so if you ask Google, they're going, we built it 20 years ago. We're still in construction. We will be for the future. And so I'm not sure there's an end date to that. And then as regards to community givebacks from a large hyperscaler, I'll let some of my panelists answer that.
Do you want to go ahead, Chad?
Sure, yeah. From Meta's perspective, they have a community grant program where they give back. They have done a lot of funding on the skilled trades, because a lot of the jobs inside a data center, about half of them are kind of the computer side and half of them are on the technical side, right? How does the system cool itself? And if you ever get a chance to tour the Meta facility in Altoona, it is extremely impressive. And it's not the data halls, it's the cooling system that is really neat to see. How they process air and how they keep servers cool. They have invested heavily in the skilled trades. They were the single largest funder of a privately constructed skilled trades facility on the Southeast Polk High School campus. They also do a lot of work with DMAC for skilled trades kids, students. The economics, as far as jobs, like Brian said, they've been under construction since the day they started out there. They also have more than 400 permanent full-time Meta employees on that facility. It's a big facility, but that's a lot of really high-paying jobs. They live in our community. I know people that have worked inside those buildings since day one. They've worked inside those buildings for 14 years. They live in Altoona. They live and work in central Iowa. So, as well as the tax benefits, which are substantial.
Next question, unless somebody else wants to weigh in. Do you want to weigh in, Christine?
I think there's a similar experience in West Des Moines that what Altoona says. There's a continued investment in our community. Microsoft has some sustainability goals, and they're always looking to partner with us and with the city on projects to help meet those goals. We're having ongoing conversations about some of the efforts that they can work with us on some of the expansion of treatment technology here in West Des Moines that, or even with CIWW. They had a whole community academy for underrepresented groups to basically get your introduction to technology certificate that would have never had that opportunity, even at a community college. And so I think on that large scale, you see a lot of community give back.
Was there anything in the guidelines that Lynn County was trying to negotiate that would have included sort of a long-term return on your investment in the community?
I think that just goes back to the discussion about economic terms and why that's such an important piece of the equation for so many local governments. And to the points that were made earlier, there is so much more leverage now that local governments have than they did even 3-4 years ago when these projects were trying to locate in eastern Iowa across the state. So I think being able to show to residents that you got some sort of a deal that's going to have a real economic impact, real direct investment in your community, whether that's through property taxes or community betterment funds or some mix of the two, I think local governments are really finding that they have more leverage and that there's a real demand from the residents to come back with some sort of economic development agreement that they can basically stand behind when the community comes and to the comment earlier, questions a lot of these different projects. So we fought for that. I think we were really successful in the project we were negotiating, and I would encourage as many local governments as possible. We do all the time when we talk to them, just to say, you have leverage now, please use it on behalf of your residents.
If I could
Okay,
jump back
sure,
in real quick.
yeah.
A term that I hadn't heard before until a couple years ago is a CBA, a Community Betterment Agreement. That's starting to be something that's popular in the data center world, working with those companies on. How are they going to give back specifically to the community?
That's interesting. And Jay, anything you want to add here?
No, I think everything was touched. Again, local communities, it takes years to build these, and the taxes that you get from having them involved and construction as well. So.
Okay.
Can I just really quickly add too? So the city of Cedar Rapids has a QTS and a Google data center campuses that they've built. Talking about economic benefits too, not just from the construction jobs, but the economic output that comes from having 3,000 to 5,000 people in your community, whether it is for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We're seeing restaurants in the west side of Cedar Rapids that are booked out every single night. There's hotels and apartment complexes that quite literally are being booked out for the next 5 to 10 years at 90% capacity. So there are economic multipliers, there are real economic benefits. It's not just construction jobs, there are real kind of ripple effects into the local economy. So I don't think that can go unnoticed as well when you kind of think about the overall economic picture that these projects bring to a community.
Okay, next question.
Thank you guys so much for talking today. How do you find that line for water and electricity usage in a community?
Go ahead, Jay.
Again, we have projections, 10, 20 years in the future, and whether, we're looking to go over what we're expected to produce or have to distribute. But with electricity, you can always buy it more wholesale. It's not the same as water where you can't produce it. Energy is there, it's constantly being produced, so we can always buy more wholesale on the market and then ship it to a data center. So again, it really depends on the co-op and the community. I keep repeating myself, but it really does depend.
Okay, Christina.
I think it's a really good question because water is not an endless resource, and certainly there's effort to create drinking water. I guess I would say that, one, I've not seen, even though they come in with projections, I've not seen that usage meet engineers kind of get a bad rap for lots of factors of safety, but we do it. And so typically I haven't seen that usage, and I've seen a lot of effort to continue to reinvest in the technology and reduce their usage. I think those hyperscalers, they're very sensitive to their total footprint on resources. So what's the line? Good question. I think I've planned for that. Like I have these, we've planned for capacity, and we know roughly what we need to keep for residential growth and commercial growth, and what we can utilize for industrial growth too.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I'll just jump in real quick. It's good to have a really good electric partner. Here in Central Iowa and Altoona in particular, we have a good partner with Mid-American Energy. After they call me, after a developer or a company calls me, I tell them their next call has to be to Mid-American, because they've got to start that ball rolling. They've got to have those conversations with Mid-American to figure out what kind of power they need, and Mid-American will work with them then on a load study and all the different things that go into that from the power side.
Go ahead.
And I would say it actually usually takes longer to build the electrical infrastructure than it does the data center itself. Usually they're on our butts trying to make sure we're done by the time that they're ready to go. So.
Yeah, good point. We've got a couple questions over here, it looks like. We're still going with students first.
Hi, thank you so much for coming to Simpson College. So my question is, we've been hearing a lot about this AI bubble sort of like going around like the news sphere, or for the past couple of years, ever since AI has come up and multiple companies have been like buying in. I was wondering that if if there was ever a time that there would be like a burst that would happen with an AI, how would that hypothetically affect Iowa and many of its like data centers and like businesses, in your opinion?
Want to start, Brian?
That's an awesome question. I don't know the answer to that, but I can just tell you I've been in this job for 12 years, and we have quarterly board meetings. And one thing that has always come up is the need for more workforce for the technology industry. We're not hearing that right now. Hiring is at a kind of a standstill because every 6 months the world looks different and how AI is being applied to organizations. I met with a chief information officer of a major company here in Iowa recently, and he said, hey, Brian, think about this. Think about Super Bowl ads over the last 2 decades. Only 3 times have Super Bowl ads, a quarter of the ads been dominated by one industry. The first was the dot-com bubble, the next was crypto, and this last Super Bowl, a quarter of the ads were around artificial intelligence. So what happened to those other 2 industries? And so you're about to probably see some sort of bubble burst and some evolution, again, I'm redundant, but it's not going anywhere. But to your question, it's awesome, because with the growth of artificial intelligence and data, so will the need of for data centers, and what will be the impact when that bubble bursts. So great question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that.
It is an interesting question because the nature of AI just seems like it could just continue to evolve and evolve. You know, you may not have a bubble bursting. So anybody else wanted to add to that one? Okay, good. And anybody else have a question?
Recently in the news, they're talking about, I'm talking to the corporate people here, and excuse me if you may have mentioned this earlier because I came a little late, but I'm very concerned, and I wonder if you have any influence on the corporate level with respect to sources of energy. And it kind of goes to her, we're using more and more in AI, and it seems that the leadership is eliminating potential resource and source such as solar and wind. And so what are the leverage points that you can exercise to make sure that those technologies are being invested in and researched, as well as other technologies?
Okay.
I can speak for the RECs. Again, we use what we call an all-of-the-above approach, so we use all types of energy to make sure we have enough on the grid. Obviously, this administration has gone away from wind and solar credits, and we're in the time of getting rid of fossil fuels as well. I can say that the industry is moving more towards natural gas. It's a quicker build time, and you can turn it off and on more than you can do a coal-fired power plant or waiting for the wind to blow or the sun to rise. But I think a technology that definitely needs more research and needs expansion is into nuclear, and we're seeing that with the restart of Duane Arnold.
Yeah, Sammy, do you want to talk a little bit about Duane Arnold? This is something that the governor started talking about last year, creating study on bringing back nuclear energy to Iowa. The future technology energy demands, not just data centers, but other energy demands, is I think it's fair to say, is part of the driver for this. And there is a company that is interested in sort of firing that plant back up. And again, I've heard you talk about this, so I know you're well backgrounded on it, Sammy. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so NextEra is the company. They own the Duane Arnold Nuclear Facility, which closed in 2020 because of damage from the derecho in Linn County. Obviously, with the growth and explosion of AI, they have what is now a public power purchasing agreement with Google. So they have a private agreement with Google that's basically going to have Google pay for the restart of the nuclear power plant. So they came to us about a year ago. We didn't, funny enough, have any existing ordinance or zoning rules related to nuclear energy generation, and we thought, how often does a nuclear power plant restart? We should take advantage of this. And so we developed what I think is a really comprehensive code. We can't regulate a lot of the actual nuclear safety provisions. That's up to the NRC, the federal government. But to the kind of discussion earlier, we demanded a lot of things in terms of economic development agreements. They're paying their full property taxes to restart the plant. And we got a really healthy host community agreement for the county as well to ensure that residents weren't going to pay for the cost of reopening the plant. But it is really important to see, I think there's two kind of sides to the story in Iowa. The folks that have had Mid-American Energy, which has just produced tons and tons of wind over the last 20 years. A big part of that was because of their relationship with Berkshire Hathaway, being able to use wind tax credits to develop a ton of, and a really huge amount of wind energy. But like in places like Lynn County, where we have Alliant, we're starting to see that we have to build for that generation to accommodate these huge customers that are coming into our community with this data center growth. And that's playing out with things like the Duane-Arnold nuclear facility with NextEra. There's a proposed natural gas plant to be built in the Lynn County area from Alliant. We're seeing that along with the water that's necessary, we're going to have to build for the generation to accommodate these kind of huge customers that are coming into our community. And as a local government, we're trying to do that in a responsible way that, again, kind of has some base level protections for our residents as well.
Yeah, because the big concern, there's a lot of concerns about nuclear energy in the public, but one of them is that nuclear power plants are expensive to build, and therefore those electric rates might be higher. But you've already got one on the ground. It's a matter of fixing it, right?
So we specifically, I asked when they came and presented an application to the county to reopen, I said, will you be going to the Iowa Utilities Commission to be asking to basically recover the generation costs that utilities are allowed to do in the state? Or because they have that private purchasing or power purchasing agreement with Google, are residents not going to see their rates go up as a result of this agreement? And they made very clear for that specific project that they weren't going to raise rates to power the data centers. And that was a really huge selling point for us, again, to be able to talk to the public and say, not only have they come and they were going to do this water balance study, but also they have said that they're not going to raise rates. And that was a huge benefit to the communities to be able to say, your rates aren't going to go up definitively as a result of this project.
And the fine print doesn't say, except if there's another derecho.
No. The other really good part too is the nuclear power plant has 500 permanent jobs, and we were kind of talking about, there were concerns about how many of these jobs for a data center specifically are going to be permanent. A lot of the generation that's built to support the data centers actually does have long-term permanent, a lot of times union labor that is used to kind of manage and build this energy generation.
Okay, we are at time. In fact, we're a little bit over time. So unless there's a really burning question, I think we're going to, you might have to come down here and say hi and copy my QR code here. Do we have time for one more, Seth? Yes. Okay.
I'll be quick because I do want to come down and talk to you. I'm with Marion County. I'm the assistant zoning administrator there. So this has been very interesting because we've been, as an affiliate, counties across Iowa. It is all over the board. Chad and Sammy, I would like to talk to you afterwards because I have a whole slew of questions and comments. But Chad, to what you said about local government, I think that's very important. I know you two probably are tracking all the legislation right now, and local government's being highly impacted. And I spend days or hours of my day tracking legislation this year like nothing before for zoning. So I really appreciate you all being here, but I would like to chat a little bit afterwards.
Okay. All right, well, I think is that it? That's the time we have. Well, so let's give our fantastic panelists a round of applause. Thanks to all of you for sharing your knowledge and expertise. Thanks also to the Culver Center, Seth Anderson and Dr. Polly for organizing this event, and to all of you for attending out there and asking great questions. And again, don't forget this QR code. Come down here and take a picture of it. And good night and safe travel. Thanks very much.
Thank you all.